Love was in the air on this week's edition of WWE Raw as the love triangle continued between Rhea Ripley, Liv Morgan, and the hunk himself, Dominik Mysterio. And it was kind of a tale of two stories here, as it was Liv making it clear that she was truly, madly, deeply in love with Dominik Mysterio still. And meanwhile, it was Rhea Ripley telling Dominik that she did not belong to him. Those were kind of the two main themes here, but we do know it also set up the match that we all knew was coming. Rhea officially challenges Liv, and Liv accepts, so we are going to get Rhea Ripley challenging Liv Morgan for what Rhea says is her championship at SummerSlam. We don't know if it will be a custody ladder match with Dominik Mysterio at stake, but if it is, it would come full circle all the way back from 2005, as we know, involving Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio. But in all seriousness, this was really, another kind of episode of Raw. We had a lot of entertaining developments here. You played it up exactly how you should have. Rhea should have been pissed at Dominik. She should have acted the way she acted on this show based on everything that's happened. And then we saw her big return last week, as we know. And so we got the follow-up to that with Rhea really making it very clear where she stands with Dom, even though, she did give the man some hope towards the end of the show after Dominik went out and valiantly fought for her against Jey Uso, which, by the way, speaking of love in the air, they continue the long-term storytelling of Jey Uso, making it clear that he has the hots for Mami. And, he had the memorable line here of him asking Damian Priest and Dominik in the back if Rhea was single and ready to mingle, because Jey Uso wants Rhea to call him, and we saw that signal too, and Rhea was kind of amused by the fact that Jey asked her to give him a call. So a lot of, again, love in the air here, and who knows how far this could go once we get to Netflix. But for now, we are limited to the USA Network, and this was, again, something where you keep looking at how they're playing up the story. And I think how the Jey Uso and Dominik match played out, to me, is going to be kind of another step towards, likely, I think, getting Dominik to sort of join Liv. Because if you think about how this match ended, right? It did end with Jey getting the win, and it involved Rhea Ripley coming out and running off Liv after we had another physical exchange between Liv and Dominik. Rhea comes out, but ultimately it winds up costing Dominik the match, right? Because, Liv goes over, tries to kiss Dom, she flipped him over, all this other stuff. Again, we're just on the USA Network here. I don't know what's going to happen when we get to Netflix. Look out. But, you kind of have that where Rhea tries to run Liv away. She kind of argues with Dominik for a second, but that costs him the match. So, again, I think that's something where if we're looking at this and maybe we don't know exactly how they do it, right? But if Dominik does eventually side with Liv, which you would think there has to be kind of that line in the sand drawn at SummerSlam, this is another one of those things where, hey, maybe Liv's, just completely love and wild feelings for Dominik are going to win him over. But it also, you can tie in stuff like this where accidentally Rhea costs him the match. Jey gets the win. You kind of have that tease between Jey and Rhea Ripley, which, again, is just, it's wild to think about, but that's where we are. I've said before, I feel like Jey is kind of just in a holding pattern, waiting to get him back to the Bloodline story. But, hey, at least he's keeping this consistent in terms of his feeling for Mami. So that was something that we thought, would be kind of an interesting twist on this. I don't know how much that plays into what they do moving forward, because this is really all about Rhea, Dom, and Liv. And now that we have the match set, we can all kind of make our predictions as to what we think is going to happen at SummerSlam, and we will do that as we get closer to that show. But, this is, when this first started, I know there were a lot of people who were hesitant, right, saying, how is this sort of one of your main storylines on Raw? But it's working. It really is working when you look at it just from the numbers standpoint, the ratings, all that. Like, this is something that people are invested in. And like I said, it is wild to think that the person who was part of a custody ladder match in 2005 to see whether Eddie Guerrero or Rey Mysterio was going to get him is now the object of desire for Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan. But it's Dirty Dom. This is what he does. He's become a man. Prison will change a man. And Dom clearly giving off the bad boy vibes here to both Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan. But in all seriousness, this is something where whoever is kind of, in the spotlight coming out of this is going to raise the profile for everyone. It's already done that for Liv Morgan. We know Rhea Ripley, one of the top stars in the company, not just the women's division now. And Dominik, is still the heat magnet, right? And so I'm fine with the way they're doing this. I think they're pushing all the right buttons. They're making, the tension very clear between Dom and Rhea, even though you had kind of that last segment there where it seemed like Rhea was, sort of forgiving him. But we know there's a lot that can still happen until we get to that point. And so, yeah, this was another kind of, love triangle dominated show with a lot of segments involving Dominik and Rhea. But that's okay, because like I said, Rhea is one of the top stars in the company, and she's certainly one of the top stars on the Raw brand, and so it makes sense why that would be kind of a big theme on this particular edition of Raw. So we'll see how this continues to move forward, but I'm enjoying this. I don't know if everyone else is, but I'm enjoying the way that they're telling the story, because I think there's a lot of interesting things still to come probably with this, and I think you're going to continue to get those sort of motivation points for Dominik to where he has to think more and more about this, where he's gone from the stage of where, oh no, Mami's back, I need her to forgive me immediately because I have, nothing else to turn to, until maybe he realizes, okay, this thing with Liv, maybe there is actually something there, right? Because Liv just continues to throw herself at him at every stop. So we'll see how it plays out moving forward. But another big thing on the show was we knew it would be the return of Drew McIntyre. And it was Drew returning here. And, you kind of got a situation where he's coming out. You can tell Drew is feeling really good. Like he came in with a big smile. They showed him walking into the arena. Drew's feeling confident. He's about to get reinstated. We're going to get that match with CM Punk. Drew's going to finally get his hands on Punk in the actual match and, just go out and try to annihilate this guy. That's been the whole point of this very personal feud between the two. But Adam Pearce threw him a curveball, as we know. And Pearce, all he wanted from Drew McIntyre was an apology. He just wanted the man to apologize to two referees. Not too much to ask, you would think, but it was too much to ask for Drew McIntyre, as McIntyre simply could not do it and, walked up to the referee's face and said, no, he's not apologizing. Then he goes off on Adam Pearce, and, you kind of had that set up to where McIntyre loses it, talking about how he's getting screwed over at every turn here, and, he's still suspended, courtesy of Pearce. He's not lifting that suspension after this kind of behavior from McIntyre. You know what I think? I still think there's an opportunity to have Drew McIntyre go to CM Punk's home in some way, shape, or form, because, the whole talk has been about CM Punk being at home, recovering from injury, all that. Could that happen next week? Because we know CM Punk's returning on Raw next week. Do you have a scenario where McIntyre's not there, Punk is there? A lot of things could play out, but we'll see where it goes from here. And then you did have sort of the next chapter of this, where Seth Rollins comes in to interfere and stop McIntyre, from going after Pearce. So that is something where they're keeping that theme going. The two guys who, McIntyre and Rollins, we know have kind of had a long-standing feud. So at least you're keeping Rollins in this. But like we said, it still feels like destination unknown for Seth Rollins when it comes to, what the plans may be for him at SummerSlam, or maybe they just hold him off because it was a guy coming back from an injury. Maybe he's on the Berlin show. But yeah, I think that, Rollins is kind of, again, I don't want to maybe strongly say that it's odd man out, because he's clearly involved in this, but we know they can still get to those matches, right? They can still do Drew and Seth. We know they want to get to Seth and CM Punk. So yeah, like there's a lot to come for Rollins, but he's just kind of the person that's having to kind of, twist his way into this right now, even though this is very clearly focused on Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk. So no suspension lifted for McIntyre. He's still suspended. We know we're going to get there with these two, and we'll see how they play it. I mean, I've said before, you feel like this can't just be a straight-up match, right, at SummerSlam. If that's the plan, which we know it is, it can't just be CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre with all your regular WWE rules in place. I think you need to make this, about as wide open as can be, whether that's no holds barred, whatever you want to call it, like street fight, it doesn't matter. Like, you've got to have it to where these two can just beat the hell out of each other, because that's what this feud has led to. Like, it's all built to this point to where you're not just going to have these two going out and suplexing each other, and doing that kind of stuff. Like, they have to want to just not let the other guy walk out of this. So, could you do last man standing, something like that? Perhaps, but I think that's what I'm more curious to see. Maybe if they add a stipulation to this, because I wouldn't think this would just be a regular wrestling match based on how they continue to elevate this entire thing. McIntyre's anger, Punk's anger, it's all there. So I don't think you want to just confine that to a wrestling match where, one guy's getting counted out, or we know it wouldn't happen, but you get my point. So I think, yeah, we'll see what happens next week. But again, when you're keeping these guys apart, McIntyre suspended, Punk's coming back next week. What do we do with McIntyre? Because we know he has to be involved in some way on next week's show, even if he is still suspended. So we'll see what happens there, and maybe you have more interactions involving Rollins too coming into this next week here as we continue the road to SummerSlam. One of the other big things on the show, if you look at the main event, that was Sami Zayn defending the Intercontinental Championship against Ilja Dragunov, and as we probably would have expected, this was kind of a case where you get a no contest here, and the reason I think we knew that was going to happen was because you had the scenario where, earlier in the night, Adam Pearce is telling Bron Breakker, all this stuff. Breaker's coming up to Pearce, talking about how he's going to interfere in this match, right? He's just going to go beat their asses. That's what he said about Sami Zayn and Ilja Dragunov, because he didn't think, Dragunov deserved that opportunity against Zayn again. He wants that opportunity, right? And so Pearce basically says, well, security's going to escort you out and make sure that doesn't happen. Breakker says, all right, I'm leaving on my own. You see security follow Bron Breakker, out of the building. But then what happened? You have the security officials come back out. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what it was. It may have been during the McIntyre thing. You have the security officials come back out. And at that point, you're thinking, okay, well, they're not with Breakker. They've escorted him out of the building. So now security's not watching, for Bron Breakker to come back in, right? And so at that point, I'm like, okay, now I see what they're doing. They kind of added that little bitty twist in there where, you have security walking Breakker out, but then they have to come deal with all this stuff that's going on out, near the ring. And so that leaves an opportunity for Breakker to get back in. And sure enough, he comes back in to ruin the main event. He spears Dragunov. He spears Zayn. And, I mean, clearly, right, we all have to believe they're heading to the three-way at SummerSlam. Initially, before Money in the Bank, I thought that's where they would do Zayn versus Breakker. But I think it's very obvious now that they're going to probably do the three-way because Dragunov has a claim to why he should get another shot because he didn't get a chance to fairly have a finish in this match against Zayn. We know Breakker wants another shot just because he's made it very obvious, both verbally and physically now, with the attacks and making it clear to Pearce that's what he wanted. And we know Zayn, a fighting champion, wants his revenge on Bron Breakker, but he also wants to give Dragunov, a fair shot, right? So I would think we're clearly headed towards the three-way here between those guys, and should be a great match. I mean, this was a good match on Raw between Zayn and Dragunov, no surprise there. So I would think that's probably where we're headed here with that, and maybe this is your opportunity to give Breakker kind of that crowning moment. But I'm curious, again, why did they decide to make this the three-way versus doing Breakker and Zayn at SummerSlam versus maybe doing it the opposite way, right? Do the three-way at Money in the Bank, do the singles match at SummerSlam, but nonetheless, I think there's at least a decent chance for a title change at SummerSlam. It's just a matter of kind of how we get there and how it plays out, who pins who. That may be the bigger question now going into this. So, so that was kind of your main event sequence on this show. Another thing I wanted to bring up that I thought was really good here, and we talked about the Wyatt 6 stuff, right? You had a couple different sort of compelling things here. Chad Gable is still at the center of this Wyatt 6 universe because he is the person, and I thought Gable was great. Look, if you're talking about Chad Gable channeling Kurt Angle, I think you're seeing it week after week now. I am not calling Chad Gable Kurt Angle. One of the biggest Kurt Angle fans ever. But I'm not calling Chad Gable that. I don't want to give him kind of that unfair spot to say that he has to be Kurt Angle. But you can tell he's been watching Kurt Angle tape. He's seen all the mannerisms. Like he understands how to pull this off because he's acting exactly like Kurt Angle in a lot of these kind of scenarios. And sure, it would have been interesting to see how Kurt Angle would have interacted with the Wyatt 6 back in the day. But you look at Gable here. He's talking about how he saw the greatest mystery ever, that Uncle Howdy is Bo Dallas, and, it just kind of gives you a reason to... And I know this kind of ventures into that point of sort of comedy, right? But it's being able to play both. It's being able to play serious, being able to play that comedic sort of style, and I think Gable's doing a good enough job right now, kind of, interacting the two. But, you did have the development here where the Creed brothers come out to make the save with, Gable being involved here, going after Bo Dallas, and then you got Bo Dallas just kind of laughing at him, right? And, that continued. It's pissing Gable off. Why is he laughing? And then you have the full group come out, and, they kind of, that sends Gable and the Creed brothers headed elsewhere. But back to that, because going beyond just the stuff that happened with Gable in that segment, the Erick Rowan promo, I've said this before, and I said if there's one of the reasons why I think this could work, in terms of, trying this whole thing with the Wyatt Six. It's because you have to bring the emotion into it, right? And we talked about how good those, Uncle Howdy / Bo Dallas promos were. Like that first one specifically, talking about the motivation for doing this. Why did they form this group? Why are they there? And he mentioned all the different reasons why that was. Here you got, the real feelings. Like this was a tape promo for WWE television. But you got the real emotion from Erick Rowan here, right? Telling you exactly how he felt. Like that was real. Yes, it's part of the story, but it's real. And, him talking about losing both of his brothers, both Luke Harper / Brody Lee, and then losing Bray Wyatt. Like talking about how that made him feel. And now, they hand him the mask, and what happens? It gives him hope. He has hope again. And so those are the things that I think if you're going to say, all right, here's why this can work, that to me is one of the reasons why this can work. Because it's the emotion, right? We're talking about something real that happened. This isn't a made-up storyline where this guy, just passed away, right? Like this is something that actually happened. So playing off of that, I think really helps the story. And you're getting the raw emotion from everyone, right? That we've seen so far. And we've only seen two, right? Like we've seen the stuff with Bo Dallas. We've seen the stuff with Erick Rowan. But it is that raw emotion that I think is helping this. Now, whether you think they're going to be able to pull that off in the ring, we'll find out because we haven't got there yet. But we are starting to see, we're seeing Bo Dallas more than we're seeing Uncle Howdy. What does that mean? How do they kind of go forward with this? And I also seen some people, mention on social media and stuff. Is the whole plan here to where eventually you get everyone kind of shedding the skin, basically, to where, they're shedding the masks, they're shedding all this other stuff because, however you decide to play that up, right? Like there's certainly interesting scenarios there as to how that could work. So I thought that was, I thought the Rowan thing was one of the best things on the show because of the emotional aspect of it. I thought it was just really good stuff. And I think that's the kind of stuff that clearly we're going to get that for all members of the group now. And so having that personal attachment, those kind of things, I think is really kind of good to add in the story. I know people will still say, well, it's too much supernatural, whatever you want to say. I mean, to me, all I've seen is a fog machine and some other stuff like that. Like, I don't know if it's gotten that far into, the supernatural aspects just yet. But, so I don't know. I mean, we'll see how it goes forward, but I'm liking the promo stuff that they're doing with these VHS tapes and all that, because I think it's giving you more of the, the depth of the story, and I think that's really important. All right, everything else on the show, certainly you had Damian Priest and Gunther have the face-off. I kind of waited to mention this now because the thing is, like, this was just sort of, we've seen a lot of these face-to-faces on Raw, right? We've seen a lot of stuff involving, you have two people come in the ring, and then you get kind of those pretty wide-open promos. And I thought this was another one where, you kind of set up a situation here. We kind of expected, this to be the exchange between these two. Gunther questioning whether Priest is an actual worthy champion, because people have had that same criticism, right? You've seen some people talk about that. Is Priest actually living up to world championship material? So Gunther uses that here. And, you also have Priest making it clear, hey, I didn't just get here for no reason, right? Like, I earned this, and talking about the background coming from the streets and all this other stuff. Gunther saying he's just going to wind up being street trash after SummerSlam when he takes the title from him, all those things. So, I thought this at least added a little bit more layer potentially of doubt that Gunther could actually win the title at SummerSlam because it was so far in the direction of Gunther just, knocking Priest down and down and down. And so you feel like Priest has to get a little bit of an upper hand on Gunther here. And I thought this was actually, in my opinion, I thought this was one of, Priest's better promos in terms of his responses to Gunther. We talk about bringing in the real life stuff, like talking about, coming from the streets, all this, how he earned this, an opportunity to get to this point. So I thought this was one of Priest's best promos in terms of his exchanges with another superstar because Gunther, I mean, this guy is as confident as ever, not just in terms of, the character thinking, hey, I'm going to go win this match, but confident as ever in terms of just his promo ability right now. Like, his lines are flawless. Like, he just continues to kind of have that aura about him. And that's why, playing the kind of video packages that they played on the show, we've seen these multiple weeks now. Gunther talking about bringing back the prestige and honor to the sport, right? To make this, the world championship mean something again. All those things. Like, that's the perfect way to play up this guy because that's who he is, right? And, I've said before, talking about, like, the John Cena and Gunther stuff, I'm like, we got to get Gunther versus Cena. And the reason why is because Gunther is everything professional wrestling, right? He's all about bringing back the honor of professional wrestling. And I think that theme continues here. But I thought this was a good exchange between these two, kind of your usual face-to-face WWE-wise. But I thought, again, this was kind of adding another step to get this to that big World Heavyweight Championship match between Damian Priest and Gunther. So maybe added a little bit, like I said, more doubt as to who could actually win this thing. Is it going to be Priest retaining? Is it going to be Gunther? Do they have Priest retain? Gunther wins it in Berlin, 4 weeks later. Interesting possibilities, I think, there. All right, we'll do kind of a quick rundown on some of the other stuff that took place on the show. As always, we do this reaction. We don't go through like your normal review, segment by segment, start to finish. We just kind of go all over the place and give some thoughts. I know some people were upset about Sheamus getting his entrance music changed. It's changed. It's no longer, written in my face. A lot of backlash online to Sheamus losing his entrance music. So let me know your thoughts on that. But we did have Sheamus against Bronson Reed, and you had Pete Dunne interfere, so they kind of kept that theme going, where, bringing back kind of the history with the Brawling Brutes and all that. So I thought that was, and I'm going to say something else too. This is what I like about Raw, and really WWE in general right now. Everyone has a purpose. Like, everyone is there for a reason. Like, you don't just have people who are there for absolutely no reason whatsoever. They come in, they have a match, you don't see them again. You don't know what they're there for, right? We don't know who they are. We don't know what their motivations are. Like, even Pete Dunne, whose tag team partner we know is out with an injury, he now has a goal. He has a motivation, right? It's to kind of, bring Sheamus back in this because what? They keep bringing up on commentary. Sheamus left the Brawling Brutes, basically. Has the injury, leaves them hanging, whatever. And so Pete Dunne has a reason for what he's doing. And I think that's what you get with a lot of people in the show. Yes, they're pushing a lot of, new talent. But, they've given Bron Breakker a reason to do what he does. They've given Dragunov a reason to do what he does. And you keep going down the line, right? There's a lot of people who at least have a reason for being on this show and doing what they're doing. They're not just there and, very one-dimensional. They at least have, Otis and Tozawa, right? They have a reason now. They want to unite with Xavier Woods, whose, tag team partner Kofi Kingston is out with injury or whatever. So they have a reason. They've moved beyond the Gable stuff. They have a reason for wanting to be there. They want to team up with Xavier Woods because they want to help him against Karrion Kross and AOP. We're going to get that 6-man tag next week. So I really like that. And that's, like I said, tying in the Sheamus and Pete Dunne stuff. Not everything has to be the greatest thing on the show, but at least give me a reason to be invested in what these people are doing. And everyone right now, even Zelina Vega, right? She wants to come after the championship after Rhea and Liv Morgan are done. So, she's keeping that thread going. She wants that championship. So we know why she's there. We know what she wants. It's very simple. And so, I thought there was, a lot of good stuff like that on the show. Speaking of Zelina, of course, she was involved with the DeVille, Baszler, and Stark stuff there. And then you had the match later on where, you kind of had everything that's basically going to set up Lyra Valkyria versus Sonya Deville next week. I'm looking forward to that match because I'm a big Sonya Deville fan. I think she's always kind of been underutilized. And now that you've got this trio of groups there, with, of course, Valkyria has Katana Chance and Kaden Carter on her side. So, yeah, I think that could be interesting to see where we go with all this. But that was kind of your main stuff, I think, on this week's edition. There's a lot of stuff on this Raw, and I'm sure there's a couple things that I just forgot to mention. But I thought this was, again, a very, very, good show. And I thought that it's just the storyline development right now. You're really just pushing things forward with the storylines. You had some good matches on this card. Main event, like we said, Jey and Dominik had its purpose. Damian Priest beating Strowman, that's a good win for Priest. So I think that there's a lot of stuff like that that's going on right now on Raw. And, it's setting up a lot of good stuff, I think, for the future. And yeah, I thought this was another good show. And we'll see where things go from here. But you guys let me know what you think about this edition of Monday Night Raw. What did you think about the show? What did you like? What didn't you like? Where do you think things are headed with the love triangle heading towards SummerSlam? McIntyre and Punk, what's next there? What are you most looking forward to with Priest and Gunther? Did this change your mind any? The promo exchange they had here. But let me know what you're thinking about this edition of Raw. And as always, be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on your way out. We just have fun doing, reaction shows to Raw and SmackDown each week. And of course, we'll do it for the PLEs. And you can check out all the other videos here on the channel. Let me know what you guys thought about this week's edition of WWE Raw.